My Divorced Friends in Dalgety Street by Rose Stone. Dalgety Street runs between Grey Street and Printer Street. Since the 70s, it has hardly changed, except now the old buildings have been maintained and painted. There is a strong feeling of affluence, whereas in the 70s, most of the buildings were dilapidated and neglected. Here are the stories of 3 friends of mine who lived there at the time of my life. Fema bought a middle unit in Eden Mansion for $9,000. As was common with company share titles, the owner provided the finance, charging 12% interest, allowing 6 years to pay it off. Fema didn't care that the building was old and neglected. It had a sunny kitchen, large rooms and high ceilings. Not only did she have a room of her own, it was a palace and she was the queen. Fema came to Australia from Russia after the war with her husband and 2 children. In Russia, she lived in very crowded conditions. When she got married, during the war, there was such a great shortage of accommodation that she had no option but to live with her large family in a small apartment. I can still hear her laughing when she said she had no privacy, nowhere to hide with her husband. In Australia, the 2-bedroom flat in Elwood she lived in with her husband also didn't leave her much space. Her marriage wasn't a happy one, so when the children grew up, she left her husband and asked for a divorce. She bought second-hand furniture, which I helped her to upholster. With other friends, I helped her to paint the unit. From a quiet, reserved person, she opened up to reveal a joyful and happy woman. It was a joy to spend time with her. She got a part-time job at Myer in the fur department and spent many hours in the library learning about animals so she could explain to her customers where the furs came from. She also worked part-time in the all-nation bookshop. She spoke Moldavian, Russian, French, and her English was pretty good too. After she lived in Dalgety Street for about 10 years, she was planning to use her savings to go to Russia to see her relations. But sadly, before she could go, she became very sick with lymphoma and died. She was only 60 and my best friends. I miss her every day. Eileen. 2 years later, Eileen also bought a middle unit next to Fema's. The price had doubled and she paid $18,000, but it was still affordable. However, the move for Eileen was different. From an early age, she lived in a children's home where she was very unhappy. Her home in Espindale, with wall-to-wall carpets and a 3-piece lounge suite, represented security and a great achievement for her. To leave was a letdown and a tragedy. The unit in Dalgety Street needed lots of repairs. Water dribbled down the walls when it rained. The carpet was old and torn. The bathroom in the middle of the unit had no windows. Eileen was restless and unhappy, and I don't think she liked living on her own. As a result, her unit was always filled with friends, not only visiting, but also living there. Her granddaughters lived with her when they came from Tasmania to find work. Fema and I often dropped in to see her and to give her support. One day, I found Eileen and another friend, Mary, crying and cuddling. Mary has just left her husband, Eileen told me through tears. She's going to stay here. But Eileen didn't cry for very long. She got a job for 12 months with the Butchers' Union to promote theatre and arts to the workers. When the Footscray Women's Learning Centre opened, she was offered a job in the office. I don't think it worried her that she didn't have office training. Her energy amazed me. She learned to swim, got a number of qualifications, and then ran a class for women, helping them to enjoy the water and encouraging them to take swimming lessons. The women's movement helped her to find knowledge and strength and pass it on to others. She lived in Dalgety Street for many years, but trendy and well-off people were buying units and the repairs becoming too expensive. She hated living in St Kilda, but felt she had no choice but to sell. She lives in Northcote now, and we are still the best of friends. Victoria. I met Victoria in a second-hand shop in Fitzroy Street. She wanted to buy a sewing machine, which the owner was trying to get to work, without success. Being a sewing teacher, I couldn't help opening my mouth. "Can I help you?" They both looked at me hopefully. The threading was wrong and the bobber didn't sit right. With a new needle and a little oil, the machine worked, although it was still very noisy. "It needs a good cleaning," I said. "But it's a nice little machine." "A good price," the owner said. "I'll buy it," Victoria said. "And thank you." She smiled at me. Blue eyes, a rosy complexion, no more than 5 feet tall. About 70, I thought. We left the shop together. She told me she had a flat in Dalgety Street and added that it was on the 2nd floor. The machine was heavy and we were both puffed out by the time we got there. "A cup of coffee," she offered. "Yes, please," I replied. Well, there were lots of cups of coffee, tea, lunches. We became friends and I learned her story. At the age of 18, she had married the boy next door. During the courtship, there was very little touching, but she accepted his explanation that he had told her that was out of respect for her. The marriage was consummated and she became pregnant. She wasn't very well during the pregnancy, so there was no sex. The baby was stillborn. There were complications and she had a hysterectomy. After this, they adopted 2 children and life went on. She was busy with the children and he was a good provider. She really believed the reason her husband didn't touch her was because she had become fat and unattractive. But the 70s changed her life. An ardent reader, she became interested in feminism. The biggest influence on her was Germaine Greer's book, The Female Eunuch. "That got me thinking," she said. "I realized he was homosexual in denial. I'll be 70 soon, my children have grown up, and I would like to experience an orgasm before I die." The divorce was amicable, and there was enough money to buy a flat and several shares to supplement her pension. Now she was looking for a lover, and she thought St Kilda was a good place to try. Yes, I was sceptical, but I wished her good luck. One day I received a phone call from a very excited Victoria. It happened, and it's wonderful. "I don't think you'll approve," she added. "Try me," I said. It turned out her neighbour Amy had gone to Queensland to see her parents, and Amy's husband Ivan came to visit. One thing led to another, and after a few drinks, it happened. "He was with me for 2 days and nights," she giggled. "What are you going to do when Amy comes home?" I asked. "I don't know, but I'll manage," she replied. I didn't hear from her for a while, and then I had a phone call. "I'm having a party for Amy on Tuesday afternoon. She's home. Please come." I couldn't wait. All the neighbours were there. There was food and music. Everyone was talking. Victoria was dancing with her neighbour. She was euphoric. I sat down next to Amy. She looked happy. The party was in her honour. "I'm so lucky," she said. "Victoria is such a good neighbour and a friend. I go to see my parents every year, and every time when I come home, I have a problem. There's always a floozy at my door looking for Ivan. A couple of times I had to call the police. I know that he plays up while I'm away because he gets lonely. But now," she laughed, "it's wonderful. Victoria looked after him." On my way out, Victoria couldn't be aside. You see, it worked out. And don't tell anyone. I have met a lovely man. I looked at her. Her blue eyes were shining. She had lost weight. And as I was giving her a hug, I thought she looked beautiful. Isn't St Kilda wonderful?